welcome to the channel where we go into multimedia development design and provide a practical path to freelancing and creating unique gigs in the digital space. Today's video is a follow-up to the how to design and code a custom Stream Elements Twitch follower gold bar widget course, which I did a while back. In that video, we learned how to use SVGs with Illustrator to create custom widgets. In this one, I'm going to show you a technique where you can use regular raster PNG images. That way you can use Photoshop or leverage generative art with AI. We're also going to be using a game framework for this, which enables you to use physics, particles, spatial audio, post effects, pre-effects, all that good stuff. Also, I put this tutorial in an article in the description, so you can follow that if you need. And let's get started. Okay, first and foremost, we need to create the assets for the widget. So with Midjourney, I use the following prompt to get a progress bar to use in Photoshop. If you are a super good artist, you can probably just skip this step. I'm more heavy on the development and coding side of things, so I like to leverage AI for art. After that, bring the image into Photoshop. Here you want to separate the different parts of the widget asset. When working with gold bars, typically you're going to have the backplate as well as the fill inside to show the progress. So you could create many different types of widgets. I'm just showing you the gold bar as an example. So I'd start off with the object selection tool and just try to get a selection. And then I just fine tune that selection if I need to, like so. And then I would just select and mask. I'm going to smooth that out 100%, add a little feathering, little contrast, shift the edges as needed. Output that into a new layer. And then I just need to separate the fill and the backplate. And then we'll use the content aware fill to fill in the missing part after we separate the fill. So I just select just this fill. And it's not going to be perfect because there's some glow, but we'll do the best we can. So if you Control J, that'll put it into a new layer. Now I would just delete the selection I had before and then come over to fill, content aware fill. And that looks just fine. It looks like glass almost. And then I would just have that over it. And mine's not perfect because I'm just kind of show you how to do it fast here, but you obviously make it nice. So after you've separated the different layers of your widget, we need to export each layer into its own file. In the tutorial in the description, I've left a link to this script that I like to use to export called Photoshop to Spine, but you could also just file, export layers to files. And that would work just as well. I'm going to go ahead and use my script, Photoshop to Spine. I don't need the spine JSON. And I just need to output it into a folder. Now, if I go into the folder, you'll see I have the two images for the backplate and the fill. Now, we are going to want to rename these files because the names of these will be referenced in the JSON file we output later. And when we load in those assets with the code, we'll need those names. So I'm going to change this to neon bar fill and neon bar block. So for the next step, I'm going to open a program called Texture Packer. And this is like a $5 program. So I've got that opened up and I'm just going to smash that neon folder that we had our layer assets in. I'm going to make sure that the data format is set to Phaser 3. Now I'm going to go ahead and publish that sprite sheet, and you could go ahead and put it in the same folder and just call it whatever you want, neon bar. Okay, now in that folder you can just delete the other two. You'll see we have a neon bar PNG, and that just puts all of our layers into one image, and then it creates a JSON file that has the data like the position. Now for the next step, in order for us to load these assets into Stream Elements, we need to host them on a server somewhere. For most people, I'm just going to recommend GitHub pages. If you have your own site, what I would do is drop them into your public folders. So take the JSON and the PNG, drop them into a public folder on your server, and then in your headers, make sure that you allow access control origin, because you could have CORS issues if you do not do that. Because basically when Stream Elements requests access to these, your server will block it if you don't allow Stream Elements to have access to the assets. I put the star here. That just means anyone can request these assets, and you just push that up to your server. So I could go to my site and you'll see the image there and the JSON file. Okay, now that we have the assets ready, we can begin coding the widget. So go ahead and open Streamlabs, create a new overlay, and then create a custom widget. Open up the editor, and we will delete the existing CSS, JS, fields, and data. Next, we need to load in the Phaser game framework. So if you just go on Google and type in Phaser 3 CDN, go ahead and grab the Phaser CDN from JS Deliver and just copy the script tag and throw it in right underneath the link tag for the fonts. And the only other thing for the HTML is let's change this class to an ID, and we'll call this game container. Okay, now let's set up the Phaser game and load in our assets. So we're going to need a global state variable. We're going to need a config object. We're going to need a preload function, create function, an update function for the game loop. Now we'll need 2 event listeners, one for when the widget loads and one for when we get new follows. And these are baked into the sandbox, which we went over in the last video. And then last, we will need a progress function. And we'll pass in data. Now, before we forget, let's also add this custom field for the goal total, and that will be what the user sets for what they want their goal to be. It's a type of number, and we'll set the default value to 100. Okay, great. Now let's load in the assets onto the screen so that we can see them. So to do that, we'll need to set up our config object so we can initialize the Phaser game. So I'm going to set a type here, and that will be equal to Phaser auto. And what this is telling it to do is to use WebGL if it can, and if not, fall back to Canvas. Next, you'll need to set the width and the height of the game. I'm going to use 400 pix for the width and 300 pix for the height. Now I would set these numbers to whatever the image size is that we exported from Photoshop. Next, we need to set the parent container for where the game will go under, and we'll set that to game container. And that is this div right here that we have. And it's going to go by the ID. So set that to game container or whatever the ID you set there. And next, we want the screen to be transparent. So we'll set that to true. And then we'll set up our scene, which is going to just use the functions we have here. So preload will be preload. Create will be create. And update will be update. Okay, and next let's initialize the game. So to do that, just const game equals new Phaser game. Phaser.game, and pass in the config object that we just made. So now we can actually load in the assets. So in the preload function, say this.load.atlas. We'll set the key name to UI. In here, you need to pass in the PNG image in the JSON file that we hosted earlier. So in my case, it'll be living right here on my website. So I'll just plug that URL right in there. But first, you need the PNG image, not the JSON. The second parameter is the JSON. So just pass them in like so. Now let's actually load the assets on the screen. So to do that, first let's grab the center position of our canvas. So center X equals this dot cameras dot main dot width divided by 2. That'll give us the X, center X position. And then let's also do that for the Y. And we're just using the camera for this. Okay, now we can show the bars. So I'll do const block. So we'll do this dot add dot 9 slice. So 9 slice is a special type of object that's used for creating scalable game elements that maintain their proportions when resized. So they're great for creating UI elements, and we will use that to load in the asset. So let's pass it the center X and center Y for the position. The key is UI. That is the key to our atlas that we set here. And then earlier I said the names of those images mattered, and that's the names here that we're using. So neon bar block PNG and neon bar fill.png. So use those names when loading them in. And then also, if you look in the JSON file, you can see the width and height of each asset. So here I have 402 width, 60 height. So we will set that as the width and height of our 9 slice object. And then just pass in 10 4 times. And that's just telling it that it can scale 10 pixels in each corner. So that's for the backplate. We also need to load in the fill. So this dot fill, and we'll also use a 9 slice game object. So you can just copy and paste that. We'll change this to fill and then change the width and height. So 339 and 29. And let's also set the origin of the fill. So this dot fill dot set origin 0, 0.5. Then when we click done, you should see the asset. You might have to drag this in case it's too big for the overlay. So you see the position of our fill is not correct. So let's set the X position. So this dot fill dot X is equal to center X minus this dot fill dot width divided by 2 minus 10. Now when I click done, you'll see it's positioned perfectly. Okay, now let's actually create the functionality for a follower goal bar. So in our global state object, we're going to need the user's goal amounts. We'll set that to a value. And we'll default it to 0. And let's create a desired width. Default to 0, and also a count. Now in our onWidget load event listener, let's get the data from the object being passed in. So let data equal object.detail.session.data. And let's grab the field data as well. Let field data equal object.detail.fieldData. And let's set the goal.value that we have in our state variable to the field data. State.goal.value is equal to field data.goal total. And that goal total is from our custom field that the user sets. And then let's call the progress function and pass the data to it. We haven't set that up yet, but we will. And in our on-session update listener, all we need to do is call the progress function and pass the data to it. So let data equal state.detail.session and call the progress function. Okay, now let's set up the progress function. So we need to get the current count and set that to our global state count variable. And we can just get that from the data that's being passed into the progress function. So let count equal data, and we'll use bracket notation here, follower, goal, and then amount. And let's set that to our state variable. So state.count is equal to count. And let's get the percentage for that. So let p equals count divided by state.goal.value times 100. And let's set the state.desired width. And we'll set that to p divided by 100 times the width of our fill, which we know is 339. Now let's make sure that the state.desired width is no greater than 339 and no less than 0. So we'll do state.desired width, and we'll say math.max 0 for the first argument, and then for the second argument, we'll do math.min state.desired width and 339. So now to make the fill actually move when a viewer follows, we'll add some logic to the update function. So we'll say if this dot fill and this dot fill dot width is not equal to state dot desired width, then we'll add a tween for the width of the fill. So the target of the tween will be this dot fill, and we're going to tween the width to the state dot desired width. We'll set the duration to 500 and the ease to linear. So let's go ahead and test that out to see if it's working. And there you go. Now you're probably going to want to add some text so you can see what's going on with the goal. So we will do that in our create function. Let's say this dot goal text is equal to this dot add dot text, and we'll set the x and y coordinates 10 10, and then we'll pass in a template string. So these are the backticks above the tab key, goal $, and state dot goal dot value. In here you can just set the font to whatever you want to. We'll just do 16 pix Arial, and you can set the fill color. Now just copy and paste that 2 times for our other values, and we'll change that to count text and width text, and we'll change the y coordinate to 30 and 50. Oops, I messed up. These are supposed to be brackets. Oops. We'll change these to brackets, not parentheses, for template strings, and we'll change the value of the count text and width text to state.count and state.desired width. And let's change this to count and width for the text. Then when you click done, you should see it here. There it is. However, when the follower goal bar updates, we need to update the text. So in the update function below the tween, just add this dot width text dot set text, and we'll set that in a template string to state dot desired width, and we'll do the same for the count text. And set it to state dot count. Now when we go into our goals and we change it, Save, and then emulate a follower event. You should see the text also change. So let's quickly add a background for our text. So in the create function, above the text, let's create a background. So just let bg equal this.add graphics and then set the fill style and fill rect. And 200 by 90 is the size. After that, let's create the container and let's add all the elements into the container using this.infogroup.add. And we'll add the bg, the this.goal text, this.count text, and this.width text. And then you can set the position of that container so you can move all the text at once. And that's with this.infogroup.set position. Now, if you click done, you'll see we have a background and we can move it around. So this is getting kind of long. So the last thing I'm going to show you is how to add a glow to the fill. So in your config object, let's add a FX object and then add glow. Set the distance of the glow and the quality 0.1. And then next at the bottom of our create function, say this dot fill glow is equal to this dot fill dot post effects dot add glow. And then let's create a tween for that glow. So that will be this dot fill glow tween is equal to this dot tweens dot add, and we need to set the targets. That'll be this dot fill glow. We need to set the outer strength, set it to 1. Yo-yo will be true. We'll have it loop indefinitely, so -1 for the loop. For the ease, we'll do sine.ease in and out. And for the duration will be 1 second. Now if I click done, you should see the glow tweening. And there you have it. All right, that's just about everything I wanted to cover in this one. You can use this technique with Phaser 3 to create very graphical intensive widgets. So this will be a good workflow for those of you that are creating widgets or doing freelancing. And I hope this adds some value to your skill set. So stay tuned for the next video. I have some courses I'm working on as well. So I'll see you guys soon. Peace.